I'm Grace Smith, a certified hypnotherapist and expert in rewiring the subconscious mind. Today, we're going to talk about 3 subconscious types of trauma you may have overlooked. Addressing this is incredibly important because while we're starting to understand the differences between what we call a big T trauma, like, terminal illness, losing someone that we love, a car crash, sexual assault, versus a little T trauma, which is what we're really going to cover here today, most of the time, we still don't give ourselves the time, the energy, or the worthiness to address a little T trauma. For the most part, we still tend to find ourselves feeling ashamed about little T traumas. We underestimate the impact that they're having in our lives, and therefore don't devote the resources that are necessary in order to overcome and heal them. An example of a little T trauma might be a boyfriend breaking up with you. And it seems like lots of people get broken up with. We weren't married. I'm sad about this, but I should be over it already. What's wrong with me? Why do I still keep ruminating over this? Yes, this might not be the same as a big T trauma, but if it is having an inordinate amount of impact in your life, then it's still a trauma and it needs to be addressed without shame, without guilt, and with time and attention so that you can heal and get back to living the magnificent life you deserve. So we won't be covering that in depth today, but we are going to cover 3 other hidden traumas that you might have overlooked that really need your attention. Now, the first type of little T trauma in the subconscious that we're going to talk about today involves sleep, and it involves sleep in 2 ways. So the first way is that most people don't understand that the root of 95% of insomnia are actually little T traumas. That whether it happened recently or years ago, there is a narrative that has contributed to this belief in the subconscious mind that it is not safe to be asleep. When we are asleep, it is our most vulnerable state. We are not in our conscious mind. We're not even in the theta brainwave state in our subconscious mind. We are in delta. Our conscious mind is completely offline. And while during the REM stage of sleep, our subconscious is certainly active as we dream, for the most part, we are just offline. And that is a very vulnerable place to be. So here's an example of a little T trauma that might really surprise you. And you can start to think about, wow, how are there similar situations that I've been through in my life that impacted my ability to sleep? And then we'll get to part 2 of this type 1. So I had a client who believed her insomnia stemmed from having kids, having a stressful job, just regular life. It actually began when she was pledging for her sorority as a freshman at her college. So as part of their Hell Week, they woke up all of the pledges in the middle of a dead sleep and did some really atrocious, scary things. Now, she didn't develop insomnia from that right away, but when we went to the source of her current insomnia, it was what happened that night, that she was fast asleep and then she was woken up. Basically, they covered her eyes. She wasn't able to see. Really scary things happened. And so it was like delayed onset insomnia based on this little T trauma that she had, and it was stored in her body, and her experiences in life and things that she had been through activated that later in life. So now here's part 2 of how little T trauma affects our sleep. Once you have insomnia and you're not sleeping, and that exhaustion is impacting all other areas of your life. You're not playing with your kids. You're not showing up at work the way you want to. Your body is starting to deteriorate in certain ways. Obviously, you just feel terrible. Eyesight can be impacted, all of the things. The fear of not being able to sleep later tonight starts to happen earlier and earlier in the day. And the fear of not being able to sleep at night just makes that feedback loop of the little T trauma even stronger, even harder to break. So lots and lots of experiences that you might not have given time and attention to when they happened could be the reason you're experiencing insomnia, which then leads to the fear of having insomnia, which just strengthens the loop. So if you think that this resonates in any way, shape, or form, please get journaling on it, work with a Grace Method hypnotherapist, figure out a way to address the thing that started this insomnia in the first place. And I promise you, it wasn't scrolling in your bed at night. Okay. If wearing the glasses that got rid of blue light was all it took to overcome insomnia, no one would have insomnia. There is something deeper here, and you are capable of overcoming it. The second type of little t trauma in your subconscious that you might have been overlooking was how you were raised by your parents as a child, specifically when it comes to things that seem like everyday normal parenting practices, but which compounded over time resulted as a little t trauma in your life. Let's take a look at teasing, for example. I was teased relentlessly as a little girl by multiple members of my family. And to date, I am the most sensitive human I've ever met. I cry regularly, usually once a day. It's from like that adorable little baby duck inside of a teacup on TikTok, just like waking up and stretching. I don't need much at all to feel overwhelming amounts of emotion. So teasing for me became a little t trauma over time. If I wanted to play a certain game, or if I wanted to sing and dance, or if I wanted to save every earthworm on the road every time it rained, I was teased relentlessly. And as an adult, I found myself to be hypersensitive around certain types of criticism. And when I got into the subconscious, because that's not a fun place to be, especially when you want to make a positive impact in the world, being hypersensitive to any form of feedback or criticism is a very painful place. So in my early 20s, I wanted to understand, where is this stemming from? Went into the subconscious, and my body, my mind, assimilated teasing as criticism. And that was deeply, deeply painful, especially because most of this was surrounded around really like cute things, right? It wasn't from problems. It was like just being myself, being empathetic, being playful, wanting to perform, all these things that I cared about that were good, being teased as far as my family was concerned. But the way I assimilated it was by being attacked, shut down, made fun of. Like, I'm probably going to cry now. So I wanted to share a personal example there because I know a lot of people can relate. Another very common example of little t trauma in childhood is when you do express emotions and parents tell you, boys don't cry, or that's not a big deal, even to whatever the gender, that's not a big deal. Stop crying. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? Once again, invalidating emotions. And especially if the child is young enough, for someone who truly doesn't have the mental, physical, or emotional development to be able to handle that moment. They don't possess it. It's not something that they can tap into, even if they want to. And it being shut down over and over and over again. This can manifest in a whole host of ways later in adult life, but primarily stemming in insecurities, hypersensitivity, social anxiety, lack of trust. And so what we want to do is be able to understand, okay, our parents didn't mean to traumatize us. To them, they didn't even know about little t's, let alone know that they were creating them and fostering environments for them to be created. But now that we know it, without shame, without guilt, without feeling silly, can take the time and the energy necessary to go back and rewire those experiences so that we can show up as the confident, fun-loving, expressive adults that we are worthy and deserving of being. Before we get to type number 3, if you're loving this and you want additional subconscious support in your life, I wanted to let you know we've created something called the Grace app, and it includes hundreds of hypnotherapy recordings that were written and recorded by me. There's a free version and a paid version. You can go to the App Store for your iPhone or the Google Play Store, download, start listening right away. It is just so nice to be able to pop on your headphones, close your eyes, and allow us to do the work to make positive subconscious changes in your life. Please listen regularly. The more you listen, the deeper it goes, the longer it lasts, and I'm so excited for you to feel better. The third type of little t trauma you might have overlooked in your subconscious mind is public embarrassment. I know for a lot of people, we might actually want to put this in the big T category, but I want to tell you that it doesn't have to be in front of hundreds of people or wiping out in front of all of the coolest kids in middle school. This can be something as simple as an interview going really not great as an adult. So I want to share with you an example of a client of mine. He shared this in a podcast episode that we will eventually share publicly. So I have permission to share. He is now currently the CEO of a company that has been valued at multi-billions of dollars. He's in his 30s. He's a phenomenally successful guy. When we first did a hypnotherapy session for him, it went back to this moment where it was one of his first jobs out of college. It was a really great job with a really great company. They loved him. And now they were just going in to have the conversation about compensation. So this client of mine asked a lot of his friends for advice about what should I ask for, how much, what's the best way to do it. So he goes into this meeting feeling really confident, really great because everything's been going swimmingly so far. He puts the number out on the table, and the very high level executives on the call literally laughed at him, said, "Who the hell do you think you are? This is outrageous. We are not interested in moving forward with you." So my client, who is one of the most wonderful human beings on planet Earth and has the biggest heart, was crushed by this. Obviously, he was embarrassed. He felt ashamed. He let it create a story about, am I a good person? What's wrong with me? Why would I go in and ask for this? And ultimately, he learned a really important lesson, which is if you're going in for an interview to talk about compensation and you want to ask your friends for advice on how much to ask for, don't ask investment bankers unless the job is for investment banking, because it likely won't match. Now, my client at this point in his career is much more successful than in terms of on paper resume, much more successful than many of the people in the room who conducted that interview. And yet his subconscious is still embarrassed about it. This little T trauma is still impacting his ability to be as forthright and forthcoming in certain conversation, or it was. Now we've worked on it. But when we first met, it was still impacting some of those conversations. It was still impacting his confidence to say a number that he wanted to say in certain conversations. And so what it shows is that at the time, this client took complete ownership of that experience, complete ownership that he had done everything wrong. There was something wrong with him, and he did not address it at the subconscious level. Obviously, very few people do until you see videos like this kind of nudging you along or letting you know that this is possible and that you can heal from it. But also, really, the other people on that phone call could have handled it differently. They could have said, listen, we really want to work with you. I think maybe you are thinking of a job from a different sector. Our budgets couldn't possibly meet you there. Can we talk about this? Would you still be interested if it was more in this range? If you're not, we understand. They just went for the jugular. So taking ownership for your side of the street is important so you can learn and heal and grow, but not taking ownership for their stuff and their behavior when they could have showed up as better human beings themselves in the same situation is vitally important so that it doesn't continue to inhibit you years, decades later when you're in a completely different place in your life. So I challenge you to think about times in your life where you may have been embarrassed, even if it was just in front of one or two people. If your body and your mind registered that as a little T trauma, then it is stored in your subconscious. It is still impacting you today, and you will feel so much better and experience life in so much more of a confident, free, joyful way when you clean that up at the subconscious level. So out of the 3 little T traumas that you might have been overlooking that we covered today, which one resonated with you most? Please let me know in the comments below. Please let me know your greatest aha moment. And of course, I think what we've established here today, or what I hope we've established here today, is that a little T trauma is anything that our body, that our mind, that our emotions latched onto in an inordinate way and have not let go of. And so there can be quite literally hundreds, if not thousands of examples. So if this got the wheels turning and you're starting to wonder, oh, I wonder if this could be a little T trauma that I've been clinging to and I need to address without guilt, without shame, and give the time and the resources to heal, please let me know in the comments other topics you might be interested in having me make content for. Implementing lasting positive change in your life begins with understanding your subconscious mind and just how much is stored there. Once you can access your subconscious, you can positively rewrite narratives that aren't serving you in order to have lasting positive changes in your life. I'm so proud of you for taking the time to watch this video all the way through to the end. I'm so excited for the positive changes it's going to make in your life now that you have this information. Thanks for watching. I'm Grace Smith. Ciao.